Caleb knocked my graduation cake clean off the table with both hands. Frosting hit the patio stones, candles scattered under people's shoes, and my 10-year-old nephew looked straight at me and said, "Lick it off the ground, Aunt Claire." Everyone at that table laughed. My mother laughed hardest of all. I stood frozen, the serving knife still in my fist, trying to understand how the people who claimed to love me could sound so vicious. I said nothing. I turned and walked into the dark while their laughter trailed behind me like something chasing me out of my own family. That night, my mother's text lit up my phone. "We've decided we're done with you. Don't come back." My sister hit like on it within seconds. I typed back a single sentence. That sentence rewrote everything that came after. The backyard had looked perfect that afternoon, string lights swaying, the smell of charcoal smoke drifting through warm Idaho air, laughter rolling across the lawn like everything was fine. From where I stood holding a paper plate, though, I could feel the tension nobody wanted to name out loud. My mother, Carol, drifted between guests, wearing her practiced hostess smile. My sister, Renee, sat at the center of attention in a new dress, soaking up compliments while her son Caleb basked in the glow beside her. Someone asked about their trip to Florida, and Renee lit up describing it, how Mom had insisted they extend the stay another week. Mom just nodded, feigning modesty. "They work hard," she said. "They deserve a little spoiling." I smiled the way you do when you already know your turn isn't coming. Nobody asked about Portland. Nobody asked about the degree I'd just finished. My cake sat shoved into the corner of the table, white frosting, blue script that read, "Congratulations, Claire," crowded out by paper plates and half-empty soda cans, getting bumped every time someone walked past as if it didn't matter whether it survived the night or not. I stared at it longer than I should have. It looked exactly like me, pretty, present, completely overlooked. A breeze moved through the yard and the lights swayed gently, and for one foolish second I let myself believe this gathering might turn out differently. Then Caleb came barreling toward the dessert table, eyes lit with mischief, voice cutting straight through the noise. "Aunt Claire, Grandma says you only got a degree so you'd have something to brag about." The laugh that followed was loud and ugly, and my mother did nothing to stop it. Renee hid her smirk behind a wine glass. I thought about every time I've been told to share, to sacrifice, to be the dependable one who never asked for anything in return. My throat closed up, but I swallowed it down anyway. Then Caleb's palms hit the edge of the cake stand, and the whole thing tipped in slow motion, porcelain shattering, frosting spraying across my shoes, gasps turning instantly back into laughter. I stood there gripping the knife while my father stayed glued to his phone, and not one person told that boy to apologize. My mother's voice floated over the chaos, light and amused. "Oh, relax, Claire. Don't be so dramatic about it." I set the knife down, untied my apron, and walked toward the gate, every footstep on those wooden planks sounding far too loud. Their laughter followed me out like a song from a party I was never actually invited to. The night air outside felt sharp and cold against my skin. I got into my car and drove off without a single goodbye. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. Something inside me had simply stopped, and I already knew there was no putting it back together. I drove for hours through empty Idaho highway, knuckles pale against the wheel, the sound of that laughter looping in my head alongside my mother's voice telling me not to be so sensitive. By the time I reached my apartment in Portland, it was well past midnight, rain tracing lines down the windows, the city hushed around me. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank into the silence, still wearing my shoes. My phone buzzed. For one absurd moment, I hoped it might be an apology. Instead, the words cut cleaner than the knife I'd left behind. "We've decided we're done with you. Don't come back." A small red heart appeared underneath it almost instantly. Renee's reaction. I stared at my own dim reflection in the screen and felt nothing where panic should have been, like my body had finally given up trying to convince itself it still cared. I opened my laptop and pulled up an old spreadsheet I hadn't touched in months. 2 lines stared back at me. My parents' mortgage, $400 a month. Renee's SUV, $640 a month. Both loans carried my signature as co-borrower. Both payments had been pulling automatically from my account for 3 straight years. I'd signed because my mother told me I was the responsible one, that helping family out was just what you did. Back then, it felt like devotion. Sitting there that night, it looked exactly like a chain. The rain kept hitting the glass in that same uneven rhythm, like a countdown ticking towards something unavoidable. I scrolled back through years of forced gratitude and quiet excuses, just until Renee's shop turns a profit. Your father's between jobs again. We'll catch up next month. Next month never came once. What rose in my chest wasn't grief anymore. It was clarity. I opened a new message and typed slowly, each word landing like a door swinging shut. Removing my name from both loans starting tomorrow. No explanation, no emoji. I hit send, the phone chimed once and went quiet, and I set it face down on the counter. The rain softened outside. I poured a glass of water and watched condensation slide down the side of the glass, and for once silence didn't feel like losing. It felt like the first real control I'd had in years. They wanted me gone. Fine. Now they'd learn what gone actually cost. Morning came gray and clean, the kind of Pacific Northwest light that makes everything look freshly scrubbed. I made coffee and watched the steam curl upward, thinking about how endings rarely arrive with shouting, just one message sent at the right moment. I hadn't slept, yet I felt unusually alert, like the exhaustion had finally burned itself out and left only stillness behind. By 9, the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My mother, my sister, unknown Boise numbers, nearly 100 missed calls stacking up. The family group chat erupted with accusations. "You've gone too far. Do you understand what you're doing to this family? We raised you better than this." Not a single message said sorry. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I pulled on a gray sweater, tied my hair back, and searched Cascade Trust Bank, downtown branch. A man named Mr. Alvarez met me in a small office with pale walls and a single potted fern, kind eyes behind thin frames. "Miss Bennett," he said, shaking my hand, "I went through what you sent over. I think I understand the situation." I explained that I'd co-signed 2 loans, one for my parents' house and one for my sister's car, and that I'd been carrying both for years and simply wanted out. He nodded like he'd heard this exact story before. "You're not the only person we've seen used under the cover of family obligation," he said, sliding paperwork toward me. "If you can show you hold no ownership stake in either property, we can begin the liability release immediately, and you can also freeze any joint credit access tied to your name." I handed him a folder of evidence, lease documents, payment history, even an old message from my mother stating plainly that the house belonged to them and I'd only helped with the paperwork. He read through it in silence, then looked up. "This is more than enough." He picked up the phone and told someone on the other end to begin the co-borrower removal for Claire Bennett, effective immediately. The click of his pen felt small in that quiet room but landed in me like an earthquake. My hand shook as I signed page after page, each signature cutting another invisible thread that had bound me for years. When the final stamp came down, he looked at me and said, "You did the right thing, Miss Bennett. Sometimes protecting yourself is the only language people understand." Outside, the wind was sharp, but my chest felt lighter than it had in a very long time. I stopped at a coffee shop on the corner, and when the barista handed me my drink and told me to have a good day, I looked her in the eye and meant it when I answered, "I will." That evening, while pasta simmered on my stove, the family group chat lit up again. "How could you destroy our credit? You're cold. You'll regret this." I typed one calm reply. "I just stopped paying for people who laughed while my cake hit the ground." I sent it and set the phone face down again. The quiet that followed wasn't empty at all. It felt like breathing room. 3 days later came the pounding on my door, sharp and relentless, rattling through the thin walls of my apartment. I froze mid-step, pasta water hissing behind me, dread settling in before I'd even checked the intercom screen. There stood my mother and Renee, faces twisted with fury I'd never seen aimed at me before. Mom's arms were crossed, lips pressed white. Renee's eyes were swollen and red. "Claire," my mother's voice cracked through the door. "Open up right now. We need to talk about what you did to the bank." I didn't move. Through the camera, I watched them shift nervously as a neighbor peeked out into the hallway. Renee's voice rose, cracking with panic. "You ruined everything. Mom's account is frozen. They're about to take my car. Do you think this is some kind of joke? Joke!" That word landed harder than anything else she'd said, because that's exactly how they'd always treated me, like the strong one who wasn't allowed to have feelings of her own. I took a breath, steadied my voice, and quietly opened the emergency dispatch app on my phone. "Portland Police," I said softly. "2 people are outside my apartment shouting and refusing to leave. I'd like to report them for trespassing." "Do you know them?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes," I answered, eyes still on the screen. "They're my family. Right now, they're just people violating my front door." Outside, the pounding only grew louder. Renee slammed her palm against the wood. "You're tearing this family apart, Claire. You think cutting us off makes you strong? You're heartless." My mother's voice cracked between rage and panic. "We're your parents. You don't treat blood like an enemy." 10 minutes later, red and blue light swept across the street below. Two officers approached calmly, and my mother rushed toward them first, pointing furiously at my door. "That's my daughter. She's wrecked our finances. We only want to talk to her." Renee broke into sobs behind her. "She nearly cost me my car. My fiancé is threatening to leave because of what she did to my credit. She's heartless." One officer raised a hand gently. "Ma'am, this is private property. If she's asked you to leave, you need to leave." "She's my child," my mother shouted. "I have rights." The officer shook his head. "You have rights as a parent, not the right to trespass at an adult's home." For one fleeting second, guilt brushed against me, familiar and unwelcome. But I remembered the frosting on the pavement and the laughter that followed it, and I let it pass through me without taking root. Quietly, just loud enough for the recorder to catch, I said, "If they show up acting like intruders, then the line between family and a boundary stops mattering." The officer glanced toward the camera and nodded once, as if he'd heard enough. "Time to go," he told them. My mother turned back toward the door one last time, eyes burning. "You'll regret this, Claire. Blood doesn't just disappear because you say so." I didn't answer. The door stayed shut. They left under flashing lights, footsteps fading down the stairwell, heavy and defeated. When the silence finally settled, it felt like air flooding back into a room that had been sealed for years. I slid down against the wall, phone still recording, hands trembling, not from fear but from release. I saved the audio file and named it Boundary, dated that night. The next morning, my inbox filled with messages I hadn't braced myself for. A public post from my mother, bold and dramatic. "Sometimes the child you trusted most turns around and betrays you. Claire stole from her own parents and wrecked our credit. Some people never learn gratitude." Beneath it, dozens of comments from old neighbors and distant relatives. "So ungrateful. Poor Carol after everything she's done." One comment twisted the knife further, claiming I'd used my parents' money to buy my apartment outright. The old version of me would have spiraled, writing long explanations, begging strangers to believe her. Instead, I just breathed. They were throwing fire, and I simply refused to be the thing that burned. I drafted a short, professional email to my coworkers instead. "If you happen to see any rumors about me online, please disregard them. Some people respond to boundaries with lies. I'm fine, and I appreciate your discretion." Then I closed the laptop. The truth never needs to raise its voice. It only needs time to catch up. 3 days after that, an envelope from Cascade Trust Bank arrived at my office. Inside was a signed letter from Mr. Alvarez, confirming that Claire Bennett had been fully released from all liability connected to the joint mortgage and vehicle loan held under Carol and Renee Bennett's names. The gold seal at the bottom caught the light as I ran my thumb across my own signature. The exact moment everything had shifted. It wasn't revenge, it was simply what fairness looked like. That same evening, the public post vanished. Maybe someone finally told my mother the truth. Maybe the bank had called to confirm it. Either way, I no longer cared, because I'd stopped performing for their approval. My phone buzzed once more, an unfamiliar number. "You'll pay for this. You think you've won?" I smiled faintly. Winning had never been the goal. Being free was. Standing at my window with the city spread out below me, the air smelled like rain and coffee, sharp and clean, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing holding me back. Weeks passed and the noise finally faded. No more late-night calls, no more public posts. The silence that used to terrify me had quietly turned into peace. I poured myself into work at Brightline Analytics, finishing a project that earned me an unexpected promotion. During one meeting, our director Monica told me, "Claire, you lead with a kind of steadiness people trust." It was the first time anyone had said something like that to me without expecting anything back. At home, life slowly found its own rhythm, yoga at sunrise, soup simmering on quiet evenings, laughter with friends who actually saw me instead of what I could provide. Sophie brought flowers one weekend. Jordan teased me about the cactus on my windowsill, saying it looked exactly like me, calm on the outside, but don't get too close. Then one morning, Mr. Alvarez sent me a photo, my release document framed in the bank's compliance office. "We use it now as an example of healthy boundary protection," his note read. I smiled, sipping coffee by the window. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's safety net or silent backbone. I was simply Claire, whole, free, finally belonging to herself. A year later, my phone lit up with a single message from Renee. "I'm sorry for everything. No excuses attached, no explanation, just 6 quiet words. I read it a few times, then set the phone down without typing anything back. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always mean reopening a door. Sometimes it just means closing it gently and walking away in peace." Outside, the Willamette River caught the last of the evening light. calm and endless, and I breathed in the cool Portland air and whispered to myself, "Welcome home, Claire." If you've ever had to walk away from your own family just to find yourself again, you're not alone, and I'd love to hear your story in the comments.